Hello, welcome to my vlog on skills versus capacities. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing squats and deadlifts, looking at the potential barriers regarding the mastery of techniques and physical limitations, also known as their skills and capacities. I have filmed 3 athletes for this video. All athletes are currently developing their skills on an England Talent boxing programme. The boxers are aged 16 to 18 and have a limited experience in a gym environment. I'm going to start by looking at athlete 1 in the back squat. From the image presented, we can see an increase in forward lean of the torso and knee. Initially, this suggests that capacity could be a concern. In this position, we can see that there's a large range of forward lean, particularly from the torso and from the knee. This could be because of a capacity issue in terms of flexibility. Although as this boxer is relatively new to squats, I would assume that this is largely due to the level of skill in performing that technique. From this view, we can see that the athlete pushes from the right side. This is his dominant side in boxing, and the individual tends to lead from the right foot. This is further identified through knee valgus of the right leg. This could be a skill issue in practicing the technical model. However, it is also largely a capacity issue regarding bilateral muscular development. In addition to the back squat, I have asked athlete 1 to perform an overhead squat. From this image, we can see that flexibility of the shoulder is a key concern, as the bar should be positioned overhead. It also shows that the athlete has limited flexibility of the hip to sit back into the squat, and he compensates for this with his balance as he tends to lean forward. This is identified through bringing the tibia excessively forward of the foot. As part of my athlete assessment, the individual performs a pole squat. Interestingly, this shows that the individual is able to demonstrate a positive squat positioning, as there is sufficient depth, external rotation of the knees and an upright posture. However, he does lose the stability and the position of the vertebrae once he lets go of the pole. Therefore, skill in performing the technique with an additional load may be a key skill that needs to be developed. In addition to the pole squat, we also performed a kneeling ankle assessment, and it is clear that ankle dorsiflexion is limited, and this individual could be compensating technique by altering position. This could explain why depth of positioning when loaded is challenged. I would like to compare now to athlete 2. Athlete 2 demonstrates a typical ectomorph body type, to include long limbs. Within his squat positioning, we can see there is a large amount of forward lean to compensate for his stature. We can also assume that athlete 2 doesn't have the capacity to perform a 90-degree squat position. However, from a frontal view, we can see that changing foot placement for a wider stance may help to assist with depth. The video also shows that flexion of the lumbar vertebrae is limited, impacting a neutral spine position. In comparison to athlete 1, we can see that there is a greater range of flexibility at the shoulder. However, there is potential that the athlete could be limiting squat depth by maintaining this upright torso and overhead bar placements above the head. There is slightly more rotation, and this may suggest that there is dominance from the athlete's left side. Interestingly, from our assessments, we can see that the individual has no issue with depth of hip position in the squat, or problems with ankle dorsiflexion. What I think is particularly interesting from this pole squat assessment is how far back the individual is over their base of support and centre of mass. Whilst in a body squat or body weight position, this isn't a concern. However, as soon as the athlete places external load, this challenges his technique, and he compensates for this by decreasing the range of movement at the hip. Here we can see the individual has no problem with ankle dorsiflexion. For our gym-based exercise, we have analysed the barbell deadlift. This is particularly relevant for boxing in developing the hip drive, as all punches will increase their power from driving from the hips. Initially, we can see that this individual, due to his long limbs and ectomorph body shape, is initially having to pull the bar over a further distance. We can also see that the individual is flexing from the hip rather than using two movements to include an initial squat drive position and then a hip extension. I've also provided a comparison against a typical mesomorph. We can see that the bar path is reduced due to height and limb length, and we can also see that distinct two-phase movement. Initially the squat drive followed by the hip extension. In comparison to the mesomorph, we can see that the bar path is reduced and the individual is able to maintain a fairly upright position of the tibia, as well as maintaining that neutral spine position. Athlete 4. From a skill point of view, there is a narrow stance which is causing an uneven foot placement and external rotation. In addition, the hand should be brought further into the centre of the bar, allowing for a more upright posture. In our analysis, we can see that to gain depth, the athlete leans forward, impacting flexion of the vertebrae. As a cue, I am asking the athlete to push from his heel. We can see that this cue helps with the initial phase, but we also need to develop the flexion of the vertebrae, so the shoulders are above the bar in the start position. In summary, it is difficult to separate skills and capacities, as there is a complex interplay where one area influences the other. Reviewing Athlete 1, I would summarise that the majority of developments in bar placement, foot positioning and depth are skill related. However, around bilateral muscular development, balance, ankle dorsiflexion are capacities hindering performance. For Athlete 2, from a skill point of view, the individual needs to adapt the technique to suit his individual body type and limb length, although this could be argued as a capacity issue. In addition, centre of mass and base of support are impacting position when placed under load, and I would say that this is a key capacity. For Athlete 3, we looked at the deadlift, and from a capacity point of view, there is an increased bar path due to that individual's body type, and this is something that we cannot change. It's something that has to be adapted. This increased bar path, the athlete is having to compensate for this by leaning forward with the tibia, and this again is affecting the positioning of the bar, because the bar is now having to travel over the tibia rather than a straight position or a straight line. From a skill point of view, the individual needs to drive from a squat position and cue to flex the lumbar spine and focus more on the hip drive during the second phase of the movement. For Athlete 4, again from a skill point of view, we need to look at stance and foot position and driving from the hip and the knee, particularly looking at positioning or driving from the ball of the foot. These are all areas that can be developed over time, and as we stated previously, these individuals or these athletes are all relatively new to a gym-based environment. From a capacity point of view, we need to adapt technique to suit that individual's stature. We need to look at development of strength, because the performance tends to decrease once load is added onto that. And we also need to look at the amount of flexion whilst maintaining a positive or neutral spine alignment, particularly looking at getting the scapula forward without losing lumbar flexion in the start position. This flexibility could also be a key capacity issue, and we may find that once flexibility is increased, we find that the performance of the deadlift is also increased. Methods to improve these exercises could include the following: Romanian deadlifts, split squats, hip thrusts, resistance band work, leg press, and having a sufficient warm-up. I think these exercises are particularly good at focusing on the hip drive, or allowing an isolated approach to focus on that initial drive from the quadriceps, for example in a leg press, or as well as looking at resistance bands work to look at developing bilateral transfer or bilateral muscular development. I think these are key in helping our athletes to develop the overall skills and capacities for squats and deadlifts.